Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. It's Season 3! I would say this is arguably one of the best overall seasons the show has ever had, and I mean it is just packed with incredible concepts, deep-cut parodies, and so much more. So what worked, what failed, what where-car attacks will be curtailed? If the brains try to invade, don't try to flee, because it's time to review Season 3! Bender's uncle passes and leaves Bender his castle if he can spend the night within its walls. When the Planet Express gang is haunted by robot ghosts, Bender runs out and he's attacked by a car that turns him into a werecar who won't stop until he takes out his best friend. Bender has to hunt down the original werecar before he takes out Leela and Fry. You know the episode, and it's a pretty decent, just solid Halloween watch. That is until you realize it's a parody of the Howling franchise, and the entire thing gets elevated to the nines. It's just a deep lore parody of a relatively successful horror franchise from the 80s. If that's not comedy, I don't know what is. Again, it comes back to, these aren't ideas done to stay typical. They had an idea to parody different aspects of the franchise, and they did it fantastically, on top of adding in plenty of other just good horror jokes for the sake of it. Think about a Treehouse of Horror. In the beginning, it was adaptations of all kinds of different Halloween ideas, horror stories, what have you. As time went on, it's whatever most popular thing is. I don't really think they had a genuine idea for The Simpsons Death Note, yet here we are. That being said, overall, it's not the greatest episode, but it's definitely not the worst. It just sorta, spins its wheels. The Fry subplot is funny, where he's jealous Bender's attacking Leela over him, but I don't know. It feels like there was one step they could have taken that would have really sealed the deal. I don't know what it is, but it feels incomplete. Almost like it should have been a two-parter and really hammered in even more parodies, going even deeper into it. I'd almost argue that it could replace one of the movies. Do we need Bender's Big Game? Give me The Honking the movie. I think that would have actually been a really solid watch, especially if it was a bunch of adaptations of different Howling movies. Give me a Christopher Lee bot. You can do it. There's opportunities there. It's just, this isn't enough to really get to the top. Still not bad by any means, but definitely has untapped potential. The Honking is a Silver Spud subdued 8 out of 10. Now, where the last episode had untapped potential, this is an episode where every ounce of that potential has been wrung out of it and has been crafted into some kind of weird, pulpy diamond good stuff, because I lost track of my analogy before I even started it. It's just a really, really, really good episode. Fry and Bender want the military discount on 35-cent gum, so they enlist. And when they enlist, they get drafted. Hee-haw. Leela joins in disguise to keep her friends safe. Naturally, the invasion force is being led by Zap Brannigan, and that's the episode. The gang help invade a bouncing ball planet. Mash jokes abound, more nicks and good stuff, and a fantastic highlight on Zap and his confused feelings for Lululemon's soldier extraordinaire. It feels very reminiscent of Starship Troopers, a movie that came out in '97 and was about an invading force taking over an alien planet with massive propaganda. Which is, again, Starship Troopers famously didn't do all that great initially and has developed a cult following after the fact. This shows that they were just fans of a great movie. That's awesome. I don't know. War's the H Word is just a celebration of a ton of great things. You like MASH, you like Starship Troopers, you're gonna love this. I'm not gonna get into the nitty-gritty of the episode because it's just the military parody episode, and that's incredible. It is so interwoven with jokes, and I'll admit, as someone that grew up in a David Letterman house as a kid, seeing the top 10 list really brought back some fond memories. I forgot the joke was even in the episode. It's just such a familiar episode in the best possible way. I love how quotable and almost timeless it is. It's amazing how a series like Futurama can stay more evergreen than The Simpsons, and yet in this episode, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. This is easily one of my favorite episodes of the season, and one I revisit time and time again. War is the H Word is a shiny metal ass biting 10 out of 10. They can't all be winners, folks. After Fry and Bender go on a wacky little joyride, they end up fired alongside Leela and have to get new jobs. Leela accidentally switches her job chip with Fry's, and he becomes a cryogenics employee. He then proceeds to thaw out Pauly Shore, played, sure enough, by Encino Man's own Pauly Shore. Go watch one Pauly Shore movie. Biodome, Son-in-Law, A Goofy Movie, Pinocchio, whatever. It'll change your life. Flowers will be brighter, the wind will be warmer, and you'll be able to go to sleep knowing that if he can have a career, so can you. What the hell even was Biodome? Crazy world we live in. There's actually a really good documentary about Biodome too. It's odd. It's very odd. Oh, and Fry sees his ex in a cryopod and welcomes her to the world of tomorrow. His ex, Michelle, sure is a master manipulator and froze herself to rediscover herself after her partner slept with another woman. Fry is actually excited to show her around the future and introduces her to all of his friends as she's just absolutely unnerved and falling apart. When she can't handle it anymore, she begs Fry to take her to the year 4000 and they can try again. Him having to give up the only home he's been able to find in the last 1,000 years. The two end up in the dystopia that is Hollywood, and sure enough, Michelle eventually ends up running off with Pauly Shore, and Fry realizes why he was happy in the future. He didn't fit in 1999, but now he has his community. Now he has something to actually look forward to. Michelle has Pauly Shore. The episode is just Michelle in the episode would actually be played by Sarah Silverman, and she does add something to the character, but she's just so intentionally unlikable. I guess it's closure in a way, but the episode just sort of meanders along. The middle part with the kids was largely unnecessary. And that wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't like 4 minutes of the story of a 23-minute episode. You feel when things drag on for just a little bit too long. It's not incredible, it's not horrid, it's just sort of there. The Cryonic Woman is a frozen in time 6 out of 10. Fry decides to do his stomach a favor and eat a space gas station sandwich. What could possibly go wrong? Sure enough, he develops parasites and the gang go inside him to get rid of said parasites. The only problem? The parasites are making Fry his best self. They're cleaning his heart, massaging his muscles, and they're helping him be the smartest, most charming self possible. He tells Leela about his feelings for her, and it actually looks like she's starting to fall for this Fry. He's standing up for her honor, he's fighting with a sense of candor, and he genuinely seems to care for her. Fry finds out about the parasites and uses a holophone to tell Leela about his love for her. He then decides he needs to know if she'd love him without the parasites' help. He wants Leela to love him for him. It's a conundrum. The parasites weren't altering his thoughts or anything, but it wasn't his work that was making him who he was. It speaks to Fry's honesty that he would be willing to jeopardize everything just to know if she really loved him for him. Sure, the Fantastic Voyage element is fun, but the focus is definitely more on Fry and Leela, and I don't know, like I've said before, Fry is dumb. Like, dumb. But he's got a code. Good and evil is blurred in this series, and it becomes more a conversation about just inherent morality. Do you follow a code? Do you do the right thing every single time? The Planet Express crew are flawed. They're not perfect people, and that's what makes them so endearing. People can relate to flawed characters. There's so many episodes where the return to normal at the end is just shrugging and choosing to ignore anything happened. Parasites Lost is one of the most human and relatable episodes of the entire series, and it starts at a space gas station. Parasites Lost is a nerve-slashing 9 out of 10. You know the episode. Kif has been calling Amy's tiny phone and been too shy to actually say anything and keeps creeping her out. Zap agrees to take them on a double date so that he can see Leela and try again. Everybody goes to dinner, Zap mutilates Lola in front of everybody, and as everyone leaves, Zap proceeds to crash the restaurant into the planet Amazonia. A pretty standard Tuesday night. Sure enough, everyone is captured by the Amazonians, and they're all taken to the mighty Femputer, which decrees that all too familiar line. Death by Snoo Snoo. Femputer would actually be played by one of the great comedy legends, a Golden Girl and Star Wars Holiday Special mainstay, the iconic B. Arthur. Kif confesses to Amy, they run from the Amazonians, Bender grinds gears with the Fembot running the Femputer, and Kif and Amy eventually are officially a thing. Talk about an episode that's just ingrained itself into the very zeitgeist of humanity. Death by Snoo Snoo has lingered around for over 20 years, and think of how hard it is to actually do that. I have seen Family Guy memes rise and fall. I've seen Rick and Morty memes burn out like dying stars after only a couple months. But Death by Snoo Snoo, by all accounts, is eternal. It's just fascinating that the line comes from an episode that's honestly pretty great on its own and shows that this kind of writing isn't a fluke. There's an emotional core, great jokes, and just more Billy West having fun with Zapp Brannigan. What more could you want? It's absolutely terrific, and while the opening does drag for a little bit and the cell phone hits a little too close to home, it's always worth a good watch. Amazon Women in the Mood is a Snoo Snoo demanding 10 out of 10. Bender is sleep bending and even bends the professor in half, who gets a whole new lease on life. With a massive inherent compulsion to bend, Bender goes across the picket line and gets a job at a bending factory where he runs into Flexo and Angeline, played by Jan Hooks. Turns out Angeline and Flexo are divorced, and while Bender starts a bending romance with Angeline, he thinks she still has feelings for Flexo. It's just Bender being jealous for 20 minutes. I don't know. The jokes aren't enough to keep the story afloat, and it just sort of bends itself in knots, to try and stretch itself to the end of the episode. I would be gobsmacked, utterly betrayed by the very idea of human cognitive thought, if Bendless Love is anyone's absolute favorite episode of the series. I will admit, this is the episode where I really started to love Professor Farnsworth's character. His little epiphany as he looks at the world from his bent angle is just fun enough for me to not regret watching this episode. It just feels like the Flexo idea doesn't work since we know Bender is the unequivocal bad guy in that situation. Remember, one of the key components of the show is that it has a timeline. We know he interacted with Flexo previously. We know Flexo is traditionally a good guy. So when his ex-wife says, no, he's just a really good guy, don't worry about it, we're just still good friends, yeah, that lines up with everything we know, and Bender is just kind of annoying about it. It's just, it expects you to have not seen the previous episodes or to understand who Flexo actually is, even though it doesn't make sense. It is an episode in the entire season that I look at and I just go, why are you here? It's just, I don't know. Have Flexo actually do something evil or maniacal. Give us that conflict. Otherwise, it's just a lot of nothing. I don't know. It's just a slow, weak episode that makes me appreciate the episodes around it that much more. Bendless Love is a bent out of shape 5 out of 10. Now this is just some good old-fashioned sci-fi, some science fiction. The planet the crew were supposed to deliver to is completely destroyed and no one knows why. Nibbler proceeds to run off and Leela chases him just to discover flying brains, and Nibbler actually has a little spaceship. I haven't talked about it before, but now that we actually have Nibbler talking, Nibbler would actually be played by voice acting legend Frank Welker. Megatron, Fred from Scooby-Doo, and now everyone's favorite Nibblonian. The brains are invading and target the Delta brainwave in order to make whoever they're conquering really just unapologetically stupid. However, one man is completely immune to their influence. Fry. Man, it sure is convenient Fry is here to help with this incoming threat and not back in 1999. Just saying. So Leela goes back and has Fry help as she gets dumber by the minute, and they have to take down the big brain. They battle through some books, and Fry just writes some S-tier fanfiction that causes the big brain to fly off thinking he was victorious. It's part of a bigger story, sets up bigger things to come, and is still a fantastic just pocket episode. You get everything you need to know for 23 minutes, and if it's all you ever watch, you still get a satisfying one-off adventure. Frank Welker is absolutely incredible. If you go back and listen to Nibbler in the previous episodes, sure enough, it's all him. It always has been. And it's just, here he is, one of the most iconic voices in voice acting, just sort of doing the long con. When Fry is using the megaphone, that's honestly a scene I still think about to this day, and it still floors me. It's just, it's an absolutely fantastic episode that stands out as one of the best of the entire show. The Day the Earth Stood Stupid is a delta wave inhibiting 9 out of 10. We find out that Zoidberg dreams of being a comedian like his uncle, Harold Zoid, a master of the silent hollow film. I'll say this, the hollow film is kind of the perfect joke. Not in a it's so astoundingly funny it changes your very core way, literally just in a no matter how you approach it, there is a joke for you to appreciate. You could genuinely enjoy the dumb antics where he clips a man's head clear off of his shoulders. You could view it as dumb as hell and still get something from it from just a, oh, it's so bad it's good angle. I don't know, it's something to appreciate that they made something so one-off actually multi-layered. Zoidberg writes to his uncle who's living in a retirement home and is determined to get out and make another big movie that puts him back on top. Funny enough, Harold Zoid would actually be played by Hank Azaria. He does an absolutely fantastic job because of course he does, he's one of the best. Zoidberg and Harold get together, and when Harold finds out his doctor nephew doesn't have a lot of scratch to spare, Bender is able to rope Calculon in the hopes of being a big film actor and breaking away from his daytime soaps. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Maurice LaMarche is brilliant. He brings Calculon to a whole new level, and between Calculon, Lur, Kif, Morbo, you can't imagine the show without him in it. And having him go all in on Calculon in this episode is terrific. I mean, the jokes are incredible, the movie is terrifically horrible in the best way, and Fry and Leela get stuck in a tar pit with Sylvester Stallone. A lot happens. It's just a great little adventure that shines primarily because of the voice work, and they just happen to have some of the best voice actors in the business delivering it. That's Lobstertainment is a pie-throwing 8 out of 10. Professor Farnsworth wants to take a tanker full of dark matter oil past Pluto where the penguins are, and when Leela refuses the mission, he makes Bender the captain and Leela goes to counter-protest. We get the return of Phil Hendry as the leader of the Conservationists, which I gotta say, I prefer this guy over the hippie leader back in The Problem with Poplars by a mile. This guy is great. His little isms are fantastic. Bender starts going mad with power and starts pushing Fry around, which causes Fry to walk off on him, so when Bender gets hauntingly sober, he ends up crashing the tanker, covering the penguins in dark matter. Bender gets forced to clean up after the mess and manages to slip off and hang out with the penguins when Leela and the protesters discover that the dark matter is making the penguins frisky, so they have to cull the herd to make sure they don't starve. Bender gets hit on the head, blends in with penguin society, and eventually leads an uprising, and actually has Leela to thank for coming back to his senses, as they all manage to escape while the penguins find some much-needed tools for their next big standoff. The episode is just good, dumb fun, and easily has some of the best jokes of the whole show. I don't know, this feels like a perfect setup and execution for the jokes to absolutely shine while never getting too heavy in the story. And that's the other thing, is that this isn't inspired by Star Trek or anything. This is a genuine Futurama episode. This is an episode of Futurama that at its core is just Futurama. And I really actually appreciate that. I appreciate that the show is at a point that it doesn't have to be a parody of anything to actually still have a comedy value to it. And let's be real, Futurama never really has any emotional points. It's never elicited tears out of anyone. We're all big, strong people. No one's crying over here or anything. No, Birdbot is just, it's good, light comedy that does not prepare you for what comes next. The Birdbot of Icecatraz is a tuxedo formal 9 out of 10. After a not-so-stellar day at the track, Fry believes he's truly unlucky and is determined to get his 7-leaf clover he hid away in a record safe. This is when we get Fry's backstory. We meet his sports-obsessed mom and Cold War-fearing dad, as well as his older brother, Yancey. Fry's been obsessed with stars ever since he was a baby, and ever since he was a kid, whenever he had something going for him, dance moves, basketball shots, or really anything, his older brother Yancey stole it and used it as his own. So when Fry thinks his brother stole his name and became the first man on Mars with his Clover's help, he's determined to rob his grave and get his Clover and right the wrongs. I've celebrated him before, but I just really want to talk about Tom Kenny's performance as Yancey in this episode. In the beginning, he makes him sound like the perfect annoying brother that just has to have everything he thinks is cool. That inherent nasaliness is weaponized just masterfully to hit the ear wrong. You really think that Yancey may have done something like that until they get to the graveyard, and as they're digging, we find out what really happened. Yancey named his son Philip and encouraged him to follow in his uncle's footsteps. We also see Fry's parents that seemed apathetic about him actually genuinely missing their son, because of course they would. Because Fry was frozen and taken into the future, his family suffered, but his nephew would go on to take one of the biggest steps in the history of space exploration. The episode doesn't have some grand conclusion. There's no major conflict that needs to be resolved. It's just Fry looking to the stars, proud of his nephew and missing his family. The Luck of the Fryish is probably my favorite episode of the season and still in my top 5 of all time. I've seen this episode easily 30 times in my life, and it still brought a tear to my eye when I was rewatching for this review. Again, if any of the voice actors were weaker, this would have fallen apart. But this showed that Tom Kenny is more than just a sponge. The Luck of the Fryish is a moonwalking 10 out of 10. When Leela is invited back to the orphanarium, she's picked on by the other former orphanage kids that have been less than successful. She runs into a successful orphan, Adelaide, and they go on a date and he offers to give her surgery so she can have 2 eyes. Fry tries to convince her to embrace her imperfections and he loves her just how she is, but she's happy with the normal life he's promising. Oh, and Bender adopts a ton of kids for the government stipend and uses them for assorted schemes and things. Yay. Leela realizes she doesn't want to be normal. Bender starts to care about the kids and eventually gives them back to the orphanage alongside the stipend check. The episode is fine. It's not the best Leela episode, but it does help build out who Leela is. She wants that normal life, but she doesn't want it forced onto a kid and have that kid believe that they're different. It's also interesting to note that there's still, orphanages in the future. There's still these Orwellian elements with like Mom. Even though the series very obviously takes a lot from Star Trek, they don't take the utopia that's presented as Earth. In the future, in Star Trek, Earth is a paradise. People don't want for anything. But that doesn't make a lot of funny interactions. You gotta make people suffer. Pain equals comedy. There's not a ton to talk about with the episode. I do like that this is our first proper look at the orphanarium, but I don't know. I feel like Leela's homeworld was good enough on its own without this episode. And it's nice to see Bender care about the kids, but overall the episode just sort of flounders. It doesn't do anything truly outstanding, but isn't hard to watch like later seasons. The Cyberhouse Rules is a 2 wide, 7 out of 10. While inadvertently getting swept up in a fun little bank incident with Bender's friend Roberto, the two find themselves arrested and being sentenced to be admitted to the robotic psychiatric hospital. Bender just enjoys it while Fry steadily loses his mind and is convinced that he's actually a robot, and everyone tries to deprogram him. It's a bunch of references. Again, it's a very simple story so they can dump a ton of jokes around it, and they absolutely deliver. There's not a ton to say about the episode other than it's just a ton of references, mostly from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's a very familiar episode because it never does anything too complicated. You can come into it at any point and more or less understand what's going on at even the most basic levels. I thought the Fry thinking he was a robot would get tiring for me, but honestly, I think it was around just long enough to walk that very delicate balance where it feels like it was used the perfect amount. They don't take it one joke too far, and when he has that realization that he is in fact flesh and blood, it feels earned. He starts to have a genuine panic attack, and that feels very, very human. And of course, it makes sense. Bender wouldn't really be affected by any of the stuff going on. It's just, it works. It has plenty of great jokes, but at the end of the day, it's the most... Where I said an episode like Mars University isn't vapid, Insane in the Mainframe absolutely is. It is the one episode that I know for like the back of my hand, but also I can look at it and go, how did that go again? It never quite materializes itself into an episode I find myself wanting to watch over and over and over again. Insane in the Mainframe is 8 Lincoln split personalities out of 10. Fry finds an old VW van and wants to take it on the road, so they need to open a can of whale oil. And after a horrific canning accident, Bender is maimed and is just a shell of a robot, unable to move. While in the hospital, he meets someone that refuses to give up on him, Beck, played by music legend Beck. And so Beck decides to take Bender on tour, and Fry and the gang decide to van life their way to each of the shows, helping create things like tie-dye and pearl necklaces for future audiences. Bender puts on an Aid concert and miraculously gets to walk again, and sure enough, the gang is fleeing in their van, powered on dreams. I think what makes this episode work is that Beck is all in on the jokes, and he's not afraid of making fun of himself. Again, a very basic plot that is just packed full of great jokes. It gives Zoidberg relevance, it shows everyone just hanging out and having a fun time together while supporting their buddy. There's no financial gain for Fry going out to see his buddy perform, and everyone's just willing to go along with it, just to have a good time. And it's not like Bender was faking his injury until the end. He just miraculously got to walk again, and it's just like, oh, hang on now. It wasn't his fault he got healed, though. It's another episode that I was looking forward to revisiting and see how well it aged, and honestly, it's a super evergreen episode, mostly because Beck was never like a huge pop culture icon for only a brief period of time. They didn't get Beck because he was the biggest name for the show. They got Beck because they could work with him and his music. I don't know, it feels like they were still having fun with the show, and you can tell in the voice performances. Bendin' in the Wind is a Cylon and Garfunkel endorsed 9 out of 10. When the alien Globetrotters, led by Bubblegum Tate, land on Earth and challenge them to a basketball game, Farnsworth decides to do a space jam and needs the crew to get time molecules to speed up the growth of his supermen. As they get the little chronotons, tears in time-space begin to form. They go to the game, the supermen turn into giant mutants, and sure enough, before long, time starts slipping, and they begin to lose track of reality. Fry keeps trying to get Leela to pay attention to him, and we even get a skip that shows at some point they got married, and Fry is desperate to remember what he did that got Leela to love him enough to marry him. Turns out he organized a bunch of stars into a love message. But when it all implodes, she never gets to see it, and the episode ends. Ironically, the greatest enemy of the crew in this episode is the Professor. If it wasn't for the Professor having them break space-time for a contest with absolutely no consequences, time wouldn't have fractured how it did. It's a lot. But again, it's really solid. I think it's mostly because of Phil LaMarr just doing great with Bubblegum Tate, which will make him a constantly entertaining appearance, even though they kind of have him outstay his welcome as time goes on. But it does make him this imposing and intimidating threat, while also being super knowledgeable and willing to shame Farnsworth for what he was doing. He could challenge Farnsworth because he's just as smart, if not smarter than him. It's a fun episode that does have an emotional core, even if it does feel a little taped on. It just sort of shines and is easily one of the best episodes of the season. Time Keeps on Slipping is a globe-trotting, had to do it, 9 out of 10. And here we are, the season finale. Fry wants to do all the things he always dreamed of. They see the edge of the universe, play with dinosaurs, destroy a planet, and when he's all burnt out on adventures, he says he wants to date a celebrity. And so the gang logs on to Napster and loads up a Lucy Liu bot, played by Lucy Liu. Fry learns of the great robot uprising that wiped the humans out while he was frozen, but Fry is too distracted by making out with the Liu bot. And so Leela and Bender go down to try and shut down Kid Napster. When they do, Kid Napster sends out an army of Lubots to hunt them down, and after Fry's Lubot sacrifices herself, they're saved and Lucy Liu's head has fallen in love with Bender. And all's well that ends well. I wonder if that'll be referenced next season. Much like Bendin' in the Wind, I think it all comes down to the guest star, and Lucy Liu really did do a phenomenal job, and would even reprise her role next season. It's got more going for it than Cyberhouse Rules, but still isn't a particularly standout episode of the series. It's a great exhale after a season just packed with quality. I Dated a Robot is a Crazy 88 supported 8 out of 10. And there we have it, that's season 3! Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What was your favorite episode of the season? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Season 3 was just a further incline in quality for Futurama. With episodes like Luck of the Fryish, War is the H-Word, and Birdbot of Icecatraz, it's so easy to see why the Fox era Futurama is so beloved. There's a genuine heart to the episodes, and you can really see where they had a ton of great ideas and weren't completely focused on current events and were more focused on just telling high-quality stories. And there's so much more to explore when we dive into Season 4. But that's gonna do it for us here at the Lecture Hall. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want to support the channel or get access to videos early, consider joining our Patreon or membership program. $2 a month and you even get your name on this fancy list. Ooh! Stay strong, keep fighting, never stop, never stopping, and know I believe in you. Things will get better. Goodbye, everybody, and I'll see you all next time.